Welcome back. You're tuned to This Week on RTE Radio 1. The posters are up by now. You should have received the Referendum Commission's information booklet, and try as you might, it's hard to avoid discussion on the upcoming referendum on the fiscal treaty. A Sunday Business Post poll published today shows the yes side increasing by 6 points. 53% of voters say they vote yes, 31% say no. Some people may even have received a leaflet in their door this week which labels the treaty as one which will condemn you to perpetual debt. The leaflet circulated by Europe for Freedom and Democracy, a grouping in the European Parliament. In studio this afternoon, Pat Cox of the Alliance for Ireland, which is advocating a yes vote in the referendum, and on the line, United Kingdom Independence Party MEP Nigel Farage. To you first, Nigel Farage. People may be questioning why they're seeing a picture of an English MEP on the front of a leaflet being dropped through their door about an Irish treaty. Can you tell them why? Oh, we appear to have some problem with Nigel, who should be on the line. We'll wait and see. But I'll start with you, Pat Cox, on the issue of this sort of intervention. We've seen it before. What's your view on it?
Well, we live in a free world, and so whoever wants to get involved in these kinds of campaigns is perfectly free to do so. I have my doubts about the authenticity of an engagement of this sort. No one in Mr Farage's party in the United Kingdom and no one in his party in the European Parliament has ever sought any kind of a mandate from the Irish people. I think it is an act of political opportunism and self-promotion. Politicians are entitled to do those things, but I do not confuse it as an authentic intervention to do with where does Ireland's essential interests lie.
Nigel Farage?
Hang on a second. What we are doing here is a small attempt to redress the balance. We've seen in previous referendums in Ireland huge amounts of European taxpayers' money pumped in through other European political groups, pumped in through the European Commission Information Office. Indeed, in previous referendums, the yes side has outspent the no side by a factor of about 20 to 1. And here is an attempt by a group of MEPs from parties right across Europe to say to the Irish people, consider another argument. And I would have thought in democratic terms that if you're having a referendum, it makes sense that both sides of the argument get some resources. But I emphasise, that in terms of total spend, what we're spending here is a fraction of what the EU is spending.
Do you not have faith in the no side here to campaign on their own behalf?
Well, there is a no side in Ireland, but it's very, very weakly funded. That is the big problem that it's got. It doesn't have the money to put a leaflet out through every door in the country, and that is something that we are able to do using European funds, which are there to provide information, and we are trying to put another side of the argument. And I think that is a fair, a decent, and a reasonable thing to do. And far from it being self-promotion, if I was about self-promotion, I wouldn't spend a penny of our information budget in Ireland. I'd spend it all in our own member states to support our own positions as MEPs. We're doing this because we want there to be a proper European debate in Ireland.
Well, this treaty for Ireland is coming at an exceptionally important time. We are, as an economy and as a people, undergoing a very vulnerable experience. We are in a kind of economic intensive care through the programme with the IMF and the European Union, the European Central Bank. And we're looking to the time when we can go back to the ordinary level of sovereignty that a state might have. And the big and the central question here isn't about who's spending whose money. The big and central question here for the Irish electorate is whether we choose to send as a people, because the people speak, not the government, not the bankers, not the regulators. The people will send a signal to not just other European states, but to a wider investment community, to those who invest in Ireland. Are we opting for stability and certainty, or would we send a signal that there will be more uncertainty and potentially more instability? This is the nub of the issue. And so this is the issue that we really have to debate if we want to know where does Ireland's interest lie.
We appear to be having some significant problems with
Nigel. Back with you?
Nigel, you're back with us.
Hi, sorry, yeah.
The point which was being made there, that this is...
About certainty, yeah.
Yes, this is, and it's ultimately a decision to be made by the Irish people, and in the circumstances we are, would you not agree with what Pat Cox has had to say?
I think this certainty point is very, very important. Now, look, this treaty 2 months ago, it looked as though this fiscal union treaty would go through and the Germans would get their way and have the kind of Europe they want. But everything, since this referendum was called, everything has changed. All bets are off in Greece. As we speak, there are tens of thousands of people marching through the streets of Madrid. The French have just elected a new president just last Sunday who has said he does not respect the terms of this treaty and wishes to renegotiate it. And indeed, it is unlikely at the moment that this treaty will even go through the German parliament, despite what I wants. And so the point I'm making is this. You know, we can argue, Pat Cox and I can take differing views about this treaty. I think it will lead to you giving up a huge amount of your sovereignty and changing your constitution, and that doesn't make sense, and Pat can make a different argument. But the real point here is this treaty now does not look like it's going to go through, because across the north and the south of Europe, the game has changed. And how can it make sense for you to consider something, to changing your constitution, when actually it may prove to be unnecessary? And my advice to people would be, you know, vote no and wait and see what happens.
The response most people would have to that is that it gives us a future funding option.
Well, you say a future funding option, but actually, you know, it may actually be better if, in the case of your banks, actually one or two of them were allowed to go bust. I mean, after all, don't forget, you've taken real austerity in Ireland. I mean, you've been the good boys of Europe. You've done what you're told all the way through. Other countries like Greece have seen their debts written down by almost 75%. So thus far, through the bailout packages, Ireland's actually had a pretty rotten deal.
Pat Cox, would you prefer to see us where Greece is now?
No, indeed. You opened your programme today interviewing a minister of the outgoing government who said that actions have consequences. He said many things, but that's the thing I wrote down. And that is the thing we now have to choose as a people, which action and which consequence. What I expect, and I expect this with some confidence, is that the terms of the Fiscal Stability Treaty will not change. And indeed, looking at everything that has happened since François Hollande's election, who he has met, President Van Rompuy, Mr. Juncker, Jean-Claude Juncker is the chairman of the Eurogroup, it's very clear that they're now very carefully preparing the diplomacy to keep all those terms and conditions and to add to it some kind of addendum on growth.
Mr.
And this suits Ireland very well.
Mr. Hollande is saying quite clearly the treaty will not be ratified without growth measures, and the Bundestag is already seeing difficulties.
Well, I'm telling you that I genuinely believe that what we are witnessing in terms of the diplomacy that is around this, and it is well reported in the Sunday Business Post today in Ireland, is a very serious step in the direction of producing a consensus of fiscal treaty and a new growth pact. And let me say this to the Irish people who are listening to us. We need, on the journey we're on, the journey back towards stability, the journey back towards some certainty and recovery of sovereignty, we need to book our ticket for that journey. And if the work of François Hollande and Taoiseach Enda Kenny and others can convince the Germans to bring in a growth pact as well, then getting an upgrade to our ticket is worthwhile. But first, we've got to book our ticket. There are terms and conditions that matter to us.
But we don't know what those terms and conditions are if we book our ticket ahead of everybody else.
We know very clearly that the greatest vulnerability in this state is that we could find ourselves in difficulty to do with lines of credit to run the state, the affairs of our state after or during 2014. The new stability mechanism, the European Fund, will be there as a backstop if we need it, but with terms and conditions of which the Fiscal Stability Treaty is one. We know what the conditions are. We have the opportunity to take out an insurance policy, to book our ticket. And if we get these upgrades, as I hope and expect we can, this is a bonus. But the essential question, book the ticket, choose the stability, choose the certainty, and then realise that its consequences can be for this state positive on the road to recovery.
Doesn't that seem to make sense, Nigel Farage?
Pat Cox is asking the Irish people to sign a blank cheque at a time when everybody else is saying, we actually don't want the terms of this treaty at all. It makes sense to hold back and wait. I suspect that the Eurozone is headed before the end of this year for a real total disaster in some of those southern Mediterranean countries. The whole game is about to change. Don't sign away your ability to set your own budgets. Don't sign away your ability to set your own corporate tax rates. Keep control, wait and see.
But isn't there a reality? We're already tied into certain terms and conditions in the Growth Pact. We're already tied into balanced budgets with regard to the IMF-EU programme we're in.
Yes, you're right, of course, ever since the commitments at Maastricht. Countries have been tied into growth and stability pacts, but those growth and stability pacts have not held. Countries have been able to ignore them, and that is what this treaty is all about. This treaty is all about you constitutionally in the future not being able to set your own budgets and not being able to make your own decisions. As I say, Ireland really has been the good boy of Europe because you've done everything that your German bosses want you to do, but now is not the time to sign up to a treaty when the rest of Europe is saying no.
Last word, Pat Cox.
Nigel Farage is wrong. We will decide, because the law says it, our corporate tax rate, and that is not in this treaty. What we need in Ireland is sustainable conditions for sustainable recovery, and running massive budget deficits, whether we vote yes or no, is not an option. We will choose how we tax and how we spend. What this will do is keep us on the straight and narrow. And to be perfectly frank, as someone who twice in my adult lifetime has seen this country hit the crash barriers because of issues of poor management, including in public finance, but not only, I don't have a problem about having constraints on a system that has played the politics of boom and bust. Let's put an end to that. And although there is anger, and righteous anger, as our President said, I think there is also a rationality in the hearts and minds of Irish people who know deep down that getting this one right matters to their children and matters to themselves.
OK, Pat Cox of the Alliance for Ireland, and also to Nigel Farage, UKIP MEP, joining us on a bad telephone line from his home in West Sussex. Thank you for speaking to us this afternoon. In a moment, we'll be speaking about the difficulties of UN observers in Syria.